to today's video. We're diving into a dark and chilling topic, the serial killer who has the highest body count. It's unsettling to think about, but throughout history, some individuals have committed heinous acts that have left a significant impact on society. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most notorious serial killers in history, an individual whose crimes shocked the world and left a trail of devastation. Who is a serial killer? Before we dive into the story, let's first understand what a serial killer is. A serial killer is someone who commits multiple murders, typically 3 or more, over a period of time. These murders are usually committed in a similar manner, and the victims are often chosen based on specific characteristics that attract the killer. Unlike other types of killers, serial killers usually have a cooling-off period between their murders, which can range from days to years. Serial killers often have deep psychological issues. They might kill for a variety of reasons, such as to satisfy sadistic desires, to gain power or control, or because of a need to satisfy certain psychological urges. Their actions are often premeditated and carried out in a way that allows them to avoid detection for as long as possible. The infamous killer, Luis Garavito. One of the most notorious serial killers in history is Luis Alfredo Garavito Cubillos, also known as La Bestia, or the Beast. He is a Colombian serial killer who confessed to the murders of 138 children, although the actual number of victims could be even higher, with some estimates putting the count at over 300. This makes Garavito one of the deadliest serial killers in modern history. Early life of Luis Garavito. Luis Garavito was born on January 25, 1957, in Geneva, Quindío, Colombia. His childhood was marred by extreme poverty, neglect, and abuse. Garavito's father was an alcoholic and frequently beat him, while his mother was emotionally distant. This abusive environment contributed to Garavito's psychological issues, which would later manifest in his horrific crimes. As a child, Garavito struggled in school and was often bullied by his peers. He also suffered from depression and developed a fascination with violent fantasies. These fantasies would eventually become a driving force in his later crimes. Garavito's descent into darkness. In the 1980s and 1990s, Colombia was in the midst of social and economic turmoil. This chaos provided the perfect cover for Garavito to begin his killing spree. He preyed on young boys from poor backgrounds, often luring them with promises of money, food, or gifts. Garavito's victims were typically between the ages of 6 and 16, and they were often street children who had no one to look out for them. Garavito would lure his victims to secluded areas, where he would torture, rape, and eventually kill them. Afterward, he would often mutilate the bodies, sometimes decapitating them or leaving them in grotesque positions. The brutality of his crimes shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The investigation and arrest. For years, Garavito managed to evade capture, moving from town to town across Colombia. However, as more and more bodies were discovered, authorities began to realize they were dealing with a serial killer. The Colombian police formed a special task force to track down the killer, but Garavito was cunning and knew how to cover his tracks. It wasn't until 1999 that Garavito was finally arrested. He was caught by chance after he attempted to assault a young boy, who managed to escape and report the incident to the police. When Garavito was apprehended, investigators found a bag in his possession containing a number of disturbing items, including photographs of young boys, a notebook with detailed notes on his crimes, and various tools that he used to torture his victims. Confession and trial. Once in custody, Garavito confessed to his crimes in chilling detail. He provided investigators with maps showing the locations of his victims' bodies, and he described how he would stalk, abduct, and kill his victims. His confession shocked the world, and people were horrified by the sheer number of murders he had committed. Garavito was eventually charged with the murder of 172 boys, although he only confessed to 138 of these killings. He was sentenced to 1,853 years in prison, but under Colombian law, the maximum sentence he could serve was 40 years. Due to his cooperation with the authorities, his sentence was further reduced to 22 years. This has caused outrage among many, who believe that such a dangerous individual should never be released from prison. Psychological profile of Garavito. Understanding what drove Garavito to commit such horrific acts is difficult, But psychologists have tried to piece together his motivations. Garavito is believed to suffer from several psychological disorders, including antisocial personality disorder, which is characterized by a lack of empathy and disregard for the rights of others. Garavito also exhibited traits of a sadistic personality, deriving pleasure from the suffering of his victims. His childhood experiences of abuse and neglect likely contributed to his development as a killer, as he may have been trying to exert control and power over others in a way that he was unable to during his own childhood. Other notorious serial killers. While Luis Garavito holds the grim title of the serial killer with the highest body count, there have been many other notorious serial killers throughout history. Here are a few more examples. Pedro Alonso López. Pedro Alonso López, also known as the Monster of the Andes, is another Colombian serial killer who is believed to have murdered over 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. López was arrested in 1980, and he confessed to killing 110 girls in Ecuador, 100 in Colombia, and 100 in Peru. However, his exact body count remains unknown. López was released from prison in 1998 and has since disappeared. His current whereabouts are unknown. Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman, also known as Dr. Death, was a British doctor who is believed to have killed at least 250 of his patients between 1975 and 1998. Shipman used his position as a trusted physician to administer lethal doses of painkillers to his victims, most of whom were elderly women. Shipman was eventually caught and sentenced to life in prison, where he committed suicide in 2004. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy is one of the most infamous American serial killers, responsible for the murders of at least 30 young women in the 1970s. Bundy was known for his charm and good looks, which he used to lure his victims into a false sense of security before attacking them. Bundy was eventually caught and executed in 1989. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo, also known as the Butcher of Rostov, was a Soviet serial killer who murdered at least 52 women and children between 1978 and 1990. Chikatilo's crimes were particularly brutal, as he would often mutilate his victims' bodies after killing them. He was eventually caught in 1990 and executed by firing squad in 1994. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay safe and be vigilant.